It's the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 25, looking at the groups and teams of Euro 2024. This episode is looking at Group A, Germany, Hungary, Scotland, and Switzerland. Here we go! It's the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada, Series 25. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Connor. And today we are looking at Group A for the Euro Cup 2024 tournament. This group is made up of Germany, Hungary, Scotland, and Switzerland.
Yeah, we're currently focused on the 2024 Euro Cup and Copa America a bit later in the summer. Actually, both played in June 2024. And we're producing this groups and teams series as well as a player series for each. There are two parts to this media cast.
Yeah, in part one, we'll give a summary of each team's World and Euro Cup histories. We'll also take a bit of a closer look at their recent history and form, including how they qualified for this tournament.
Yeah, and in part two, we'll look at the teams in comparison to each other in the groups, looking at their rankings, head-to-head history, and their chances of success. So we'll end that with a discussion of their prospects and our predictions.
All right, well, let's get on with it.
Okay, well, we're going to jump in with the first team in the group, Germany, and take a look at their kind of broader history. So Germany has an argument as the strongest team in world football, perhaps behind Brazil. Despite weak starts in both World Cup and Euro Cup play, they have reached the final in 8 World Cups and in 6 Euro Cups, winning half the time in each. The 5 years surrounding 1970 and 1990 were their strongest periods in both tournaments. Lapses are few, never failing to qualify for a World Cup, and only once in 1968 a Euro Cup. Even group stage exits are rare, suffering that only once in World Cup play before recent times. That was ironically in 1938 at the height of their political power. In Euro Cup play, they fell at the group stage twice in a row in 2000 and 2004, but their reputation was maintained with strong World Cup results during that period. So overall, their worst period is recent times.
Yeah, and I'll talk a bit about those recent times for Germany. Germany suffered only their second group stage exit from the World Cup in 2018. It came as a shock, but with a round of 16 exit in the 2020 Euro Cup and another group stage exit in the 2022 World Cup, it now amounts to their worst period in their history. Their most recent campaign was an ambivalent third place finish in their 2022-2023 Nations League campaign, and they did not participate in Euro 2024 qualifying, despite surely needing the team development that such a campaign affords. Their World Cup title in 2014 is the last strong result for a team that normally views anything short of the semifinals as a weak campaign.
All right, well, that gives us a lot to discuss in the discussion section. Normally at this time, we would take a look at their Euro Cup 2024 qualifying campaign, but as hosts, they didn't take part in qualifying. And just quickly, Connor, do you know why that was?
I'm not sure why. I mean, they have qualified automatically. I think in some campaigns, they've kind of done like a dummy qualification in the past where they participate, but their results don't count. So why that was not the case this time, I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, I mentioned that it may not help the fact that they didn't qualify, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, that dummy campaign, I think that came into being after France won the 1998 World Cup and then qualified automatically as defending champions for the 2002 World Cup, but fell out at the group stage. So the feeling was that they needed that qualification process to prepare themselves. And I think that's pretty much been the view in world football. Hosts generally participate in qualifying now. So it was a bit odd that Germany didn't. I think it's to their detriment.
I think so, and I think particularly, as we mentioned, coming out of or trying to come out of a week, a few weak campaigns. I mean, there is some rebuilding. There's going to be some new and younger players brought in, and they probably would have benefited from some competitive level games. So we'll see how that affects them in this tournament, I suppose.
Yeah, we'll take that up in the discussion at the end. We kind of got drawn into it a little bit there. But let's continue our look at the teams with the broader history of Hungary. And just trying to get the graphics right there. So Hungary took second place in the 1938 and the 1954 World Cups and were considered the strongest team in the world. England disagreed and challenged them to home and away games, but Hungary proved their worth, thrashing England in both and handing England their first ever home loss at Wembley, no less. But Hungary declined steadily after the Soviet Union brutally quashed the revolution in 1956.
Germany, Hungary,
they continued to reach
Scotland,
tournaments through the
Switzerland.
1960s, but their results became less
This
competitive.
episode is looking
Their
at
last
Group
appearance in
B,
a tournament was the
Spain,
1986 World Cup,
Albania,
but by then the group
Croatia,
stage was their
and
best
Italy.
showing since a fourth place finish in
This
the
episode is looking at
1972
Group
Euro
C,
Cup. Their
England,
decline continued
Denmark,
to finishes in the bottom
Slovenia,
half of the
and Serbia.
qualifying groups they were in, hitting
This
rock
episode
bottom
is
with a
looking at
sixth
Group
place
D,
finish in their
France,
Euro 2008
Austria,
qualifying group.
Netherlands,
However,
and Poland.
improving performances since
This
2012
episode is looking
are
at
moving
Group
in the
E,
direction of a resurgence.
Belgium,
Though by
Romania,
no means to their former
Slovakia,
level.
and
They have reached the
Ukraine.
Euro Cup the
This
last three
episode is
times,
looking at
including
Group
this one,
F,
ever since it
Portugal,
expanded to 24 teams in
Turkey,
2016.
Czech Republic,
However, there
and
is a danger
Georgia.
of making too much of this improvement because their qualifying campaigns have not improved significantly.
Well, great summary. On to their recent performance. So 2012 marked their first finish in the top half of a qualifying table since 1988. And that itself an uncharacteristically strong World Cup campaign. They rose to 3 third-place finishes in World Cup qualification and in 2 Euro Cup qualifications, though they fell back to 4th-place finishes in their 2020 and 2022 campaigns. Their Euro qualifications have not been much better, but did lead them to the Cup from 2016 onwards, and in the first of these, they passed the group stage. Their 2024 Euro qualification did see them finish first in the group, but the opponents were quite easy, and we'll have a look at that shortly. Mention should be made, though, of their impressive 2022-23 Nations League campaign. In a very tough group with Italy, Germany, and England, they finished second, coming full circle and tormenting England by beating them twice, including a 4-0 win in England that helped relegate England to Group B.
That's a great rivalry, England and Hungary.
Yeah.
But as you said, let's take a closer look at their campaign for this tournament. Do you want to take us through that?
Yeah, so Hungary were in a 5-team group. They won all their games at home and were undefeated on the road, though they only won one of those road games, but it happened to be against second-place finisher Serbia. So the competition we mentioned, it wasn't the most difficult group. Serbia, Montenegro, Lithuania, and Bulgaria made up the 5-team group along with Hungary. But that said, Hungary's performance was good, winning 5 and drawing 3 of their games to finish first in the group.
Yeah, and as we said, their previous campaigns, even though they reached the Euro Cup, never yielded a first-place finish. So just psychologically, I think this is another step forward for them.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to our third team, Scotland. And Scotland is, along with England, the oldest national soccer team. But like all British teams, they didn't participate in early editions of the World and Euro Cups, preferring local tournaments. Once they did join, they qualified for 9 of the 13 World Cups up until 2000, but only 2 of the 8 Euro Cups. After 2000, though, they qualified for neither until reaching the 2020 Euro Cup. In none of their 11 successful qualifications, both World and Euro Cup there, in none of them did they pass the group stage. They were plagued with bad luck, sometimes coming tantalizingly close to reaching the next level in both qualification or in group stages. 3 World Cups in a row from 1974 to 1986 saw them come dramatically close to advancing beyond the group stage, but it was never to be. At the game level, they can contend with the best, but they also drop points to the weakest and sometimes even in the same campaign. So Scotland's inconsistency is a defining feature.
Yeah. Third place in 2018 World Cup qualifying and 2020 Euro Cup qualifying was their average finish, but not enough to get them into a cup. It was their first place finish in Nations League C, and then a good performance in the playoffs that earned their first cup appearance of the millennium in 2020. That was in the Euros. They carried that form forward, and recent improvement brought them to second place finishes in 2022 World Cup and 2024 Euro Cup qualifying campaigns. It's an exciting period for Scotland, who will aim for their first trip beyond a group stage of a tournament in their history.
Yeah, that's quite a record. 11 successful qualifications and never passing the group stage.
Indeed.
Let's take a closer look then at their campaign for reaching this tournament.
Yeah, their campaign started incredibly, it has to be said. They won their first 5 games in a row, including a home win over Spain and an away win over Norway. It fizzled after that as they failed to win any of their final 3 games. But they had already done enough to basically secure an early qualification and finished 6 points ahead of third place Norway, though 4 points behind group winners Spain. Each team won 2-0 at home there. So, an impressive campaign, but inconsistency throughout it, as you alluded to already.
Yeah, I mean, no surprise that they lost in Spain. Nobody wins in Spain, really. But the tie in Georgia and the tie at home to Norway, kind of as you said, fizzling finish.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a look at our last team. It is Switzerland. By no means the weakest team in the group, and we will talk about the pots here when we get to part 2. But the overall history of Switzerland, they made their presence known in the early years, reaching the quarterfinals in 3 of the first 4 cups to 1954. They were in decline by the time the Euro Cup started in 1960. And after a World Cup qualification in 1966, they didn't reach either cup until 1994. Qualifying about half the time for both cups after that, their form in World Cup improved from 2006, when they not only reached all 5 cups, but passed the group stage in 4 of them. It took until 2016 to find that form in Euro Cup play, but they have both reached and passed the group stage of the last 2 competitions. In the most recent, in 2020, they went more than 1 step beyond the group stage of any cup for the first time in their history. But at the risk of sounding cynical, good fortune in their grouping has played a role. I should say in their groupings in general, has played a role, perhaps inflating their success, though they have been growing into it.
Yeah. Recent campaigns have been strong for Switzerland, reaching beyond the group stage of every cup since 2014. They still struggle with top teams and are not one themselves, but their consistency against lower teams has landed them at the top of some recent qualifying tables. 2020 was a qualitative step forward in that they went more than 1 step beyond the group stage for the first time in their history. It included a win over Giants France and taking Spain to penalties, challenging top teams more than usual. Their 2022-23 Euro Nations League campaign saw them beat Portugal and Spain, handing the latter a rare home loss. 2022 World Cup qualifying also saw them finish first ahead of European champions Italy. But they cannot yet be seen as a top-tier team. Qualifying for the 2024 Euro Cup once again saw them luckily grouped with weak opposition, but they uncharacteristically dropped points and ties with them and finished second. And we'll have a look at that again right away.
Yeah, I know when we were doing the World Cup, we had a bit of a disagreement or about Switzerland getting lucky groupings. But come on, Connor, take a look at this, their recent campaign, and tell me if it's an easy group.
It is an easy group. It can sometimes, I've seen this with other teams, it becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling circle or a virtuous circle where you get an easy group and then you win it and then you're a top seed and you get an easy group, and it kind of goes that way. I think Greece had that for a while after their Euro Cup success.
Oh, yeah.
But anyways, Switzerland was grouped with Romania, Israel, Belarus, and Kosovo. Although they usually do quite well, it was an inconsistent campaign. They only won 4 of their 10 games, if you can believe it, but only lost 1 of them. So it was a campaign actually that started with 3 wins over, I believe Andorra actually was in the group as well.
Yeah.
So they won over Belarus, Israel, and Andorra. But then after that, they only beat Andorra again. In the meantime, tying Kosovo, tying Belarus 3-3 at home, and then losing their final match in Romania. So it was closer than it should have been for them. They finished 5 points behind Romania and just 2 ahead of Israel in second place.
Yeah, and a lot of late goals in this. We won't get into the weeds too much, but that 3-3 draw at home to Belarus, which you mentioned, they were actually down 3-1, but got a couple of late goals at 89 and 90 to salvage a draw from that. So not really a convincing performance. Well, usually their strength is against these kind of third and fourth tier teams, and they really struggled with them here. So not a great note to go into the cup on.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, well, we've been kind of edging towards our discussion. I'm looking forward to getting there, but we're going to kind of compare the teams on a few bases here, beginning with the pots and rankings. So this was a bit odd, Connor. Can you tell us how the pots were decided upon here?
Yeah, typically pots are decided by FIFA rankings or UEFA rankings, as the case may be. But in this case, it was based purely on points scored in qualifying. So a little bit more merit-based, you could argue. It was based on the qualifying campaign. So we'll look at where the teams come from. So Germany as hosts were given kind of spot 1A. So they were always going to be the top team from pot 1. Hungary actually are the top team in pot 2, which means they had the 6th best qualifying record. That pot also includes Turkey, Romania, Denmark, Albania, Austria. But Hungary, the top team from that.
Yeah, generally first place finishers in the group there.
Yes. Scotland were second from pot 3. And then Switzerland were actually third in pot 4, but only ahead of the playoff winners. So really Switzerland got in with the weakest qualifying campaign out of all 20 teams that qualified automatically, other than the playoffs. So I guess what it says is that, Germany, Hungary, and Scotland all had pretty good campaigns for their respective pots.
Yeah, this can be a bit deceptive because, as we say, we're used to the pots being based on rankings. If that were the case here, it would look like a very tough group. But in fact, we did see Hungary and Switzerland both had fairly easy qualifying group. Perhaps Scotland a bit tougher than them, and Germany not qualifying, not going through qualification at all. So actually, I don't feel there's that much to learn from the chart here.
Yeah, I mean, you'd probably expect Switzerland to be a higher seed, but also perhaps Hungary and Scotland to be lower seeds. So I think it probably, on balance, has kind of worked itself out in the wash in this group.
Yeah, probably, yeah. Well, let's take a look at the rankings, and maybe that'll help to distinguish them a bit more.
So starting with Germany, Germany are currently 16th in the FIFA rankings and 14th in ELO. ELO has a bit more of a kind of a long-term trend. And this is really a low point from Germany. From 2014 to 2018, they found themselves often in first or second place in the world rankings in both systems, but they kind of have dropped significantly and abruptly after that, and have actually been outside the top 10 for the last 5 years. So Germany has not spent a lot of its time in its history outside the top 10 in world or ELO rankings, but that's where they find themselves now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Germans must be sickened by seeing that below the top 10. And I would hazard to guess that they've probably never been outside the top 10 in their history, but ever since the 2018 World Cup, where they were knocked out of the group stage below the top 10, they'll certainly be wanting to put that right here.
Yeah, for sure. Next, we'll look at Hungary, who are 27th in FIFA rankings and 19th in ELO. Hungary, we've seen, have had a really up and down history, and they've been a little bit up and down in the rankings too. They kind of peaked around 2015-16 in FIFA rankings, at least in 20th, and then kind of dipped and are now as high as they've been since that time. In ELO, they've crept up quite steadily from in the 60s in June 2018 to 19th in December 2023. So although a bit up and down in both FIFA and ELO, it's trended towards kind of slow and steady improvement over the last 5 years.
Yeah, and as we saw in the longer term summary, I think it's always in their mind the power that they used to be, and hard to say that they'll obviously won't get back to being the top team in the world, but must be happy to see the improvement over the last 10 years roughly.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on to Scotland, they're 36th in FIFA and 30th in ELO. And for Scotland, that actually does represent kind of slow and steady improvement as well. We mentioned it took them a long time to qualify for a tournament this millennium, but they've now qualified for 2 Euros in a row and have done well in World Cup qualifying in between that. So that's reflected in their rankings, where they've gone from basically the 60s and 50s in the world to now in the 30s. So good improvement for them.
Yeah, I mean, another team that has ambitions to get back to where they were, regularly qualifying for World Cups in the previous century. So it must be depressing for them not to have reached one for 20 years until 2020. But they're looking quite good right now. I mean, this is the highest they've been, in quite a long time.
Yeah, a decade.
Yeah. Okay.
Next, we have Switzerland, who are 18th in FIFA and 26th in ELO. So interestingly, their FIFA ranking is higher than Hungary's and just 2 behind Germany, but their ELO ranking them places them below Hungary and above Scotland. So a bit of disparity there. Unlike Scotland and Hungary, consistency's being kind of a hallmark of Switzerland. That's reflected in their rankings too, where they're really never outside the top 20. They've kind of dropped just in the last year because of that kind of indifferent qualification for this tournament. But in general, they're a top 20 team in the world.
Yeah, you said it all there. I mean, that was a poor qualification, which has dropped them out of the top 20. But they've been very good passing the group stage of tournaments, as we saw. So it'll be interesting to see. I think the drop below 20 is a bit of a false signal here, but we should look at these teams' rankings in comparison to each other, which you started to do. We have Germany at 16, Switzerland 18, Hungary 27, and Scotland at 36 in the FIFA rankings. And do you want to kind of summarize the ELO rankings there?
Yeah, so the difference in ELO is really where Switzerland fits. In ELO, it's Germany 14th, Hungary 19th, Switzerland 26th, and Scotland 30th. So, I mean, what it tells us is that Germany is the top, Scotland's the lowest ranked team, and then Hungary and Switzerland, perhaps you can make an argument as who the second strongest team is.
Yeah, it's interesting that ELO and FIFA are almost directly reversed on Hungary and Switzerland. So we'll get into that in the discussion. But before doing that, we're going to look at the head-to-head records of these teams, and that'll begin with Germany versus Hungary.
Yeah, they actually haven't met that many times. We're looking at World Cup and Euro Cup finals and qualifying. They met 3 times and they have an even record of 1-1-1.
Yeah, and there's some interesting details to go through. I mean, 2 of those meetings were both in the 1954 World Cup, which was a classic. In the group stage, Hungary won 8-3, just a demonstration of how powerful they were at the time. But totally unexpectedly in the final, Germany pulled off a win. There's even a movie made about it.
Yeah,
Have
they
you
came
seen?
from,
Yeah.
I haven't seen the movie, but Germany came from 2 goals down to win 3-2.
Yeah, wow. Interestingly, too, their most recent meeting, or their only meeting after that, was in the 2020 Euro Cup group stage, and they tied there. The game was played in Germany, so that's kind of interesting as far as this tournament goes, too.
Yeah.
And we're currently kind of debating whether to include Nations League scores in the head-to-head summary. We don't include friendlies, but in 2022-23 Nations League, Hungary bested Germany, so that was a 1-1 tie and a 1-0 win over Germany. So, if we do include those, it would be 2 wins, 2 ties, and 1 loss. Hungary's superior record over Germany. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the 1954 games were famous, but not so relevant. The 2022-2023 Nations League is a lot more recent, and yeah, Hungary having the better record is certainly interesting.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to Germany versus Scotland.
Yeah, they've met more frequently, 8 times in fact, and Germany is undefeated, winning 6 and drawing 2.
Yes, and their most recent meetings were in 2016, where Germany won both legs of Euro Cup qualifying there. Let's go to Germany versus Switzerland.
They've met 4 times, actually all in the World Cup finals, and Germany with a superior record, though only slightly. It's 2 wins, 1 draw, and 1 loss.
That's right, and not that relevant because 1966 was the last time they met. Hungary versus Scotland.
They haven't met, actually. This will be their first kind of competitive meeting between the 2 sides.
All right. Scotland over Switzerland.
Funny enough, they've met 9 times, and Scotland actually has a superior record with 4 wins, 3 draws, and 2 losses. So it's close.
Yeah, pretty even there, but again, maybe not that relevant. 1996, the last time they met competitively. And finally, Switzerland versus Hungary.
And they've met 9 times as well, and it's Switzerland with a 4-win, 3 draw, and 2 loss record. So again, kind of tight, but Switzerland edge it.
Yeah, but here we can see kind of Switzerland's consistency. The last time they met was in 2018, and Switzerland won both of those games. Yeah. Okay, I wasn't sure how to finish off there, but let's move on to the odds. Unfortunately, I couldn't get odds for the group itself, which is too bad, because I would love to see what the odds makers are thinking. But we do have the odds to win the tournament overall, so it'll give us a bit of a view of how odds makers are viewing these teams relative to each other.
Yeah, so Germany are the 3rd most likely team considered to win it at 13.7%. Hungary and Scotland are 1.28% each, just behind Switzerland's 1.5. So I guess to win the tournament, the odds makers give Germany a pretty big lead and then favor Switzerland slightly over the other 2.
Right, and maybe that's a good place to begin our discussion, because we saw in the FIFA and ELO rankings that a bit contentious between Switzerland and Hungary. How do you see it? Do you see Switzerland as the stronger team, like the odds makers do?
I do. I mean, we've debated Switzerland, as you mentioned, many times. I actually think of Switzerland as a pretty strong and solid team with really good consistency. Hungary are kind of have spiked recently. And, while their qualification results, you might think maybe they weren't in the strongest groups, their stunning Nations League shows that they can compete with the very best. So it'll be interesting if Hungary can carry that form in, but kind of over the last several years and probably coming into this tournament, I do favor Switzerland overall.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for me, I see a big difference here between the kind of historical performance and the recent performance. So in terms of recent performance, Germany has been quite poor. Scotland and Hungary are probably playing above their normal level. And Switzerland, apart from the qualifying campaign, pretty solid over the last little while. So it's kind of a question of that versus their historical form, which I'm sure you'll agree would probably put Germany way above the rest. Switzerland as a fairly solid second, maybe Hungary as third, slightly over Scotland, but the two quite even, like the odds makers suggest. What do you think? Do you think this will kind of go the way of their historical strength or the way of their recent strength?
Yeah, I mean, you make a really good point. It's a tough question to answer because, I would agree with you on the historical ranking, Germany being far ahead, but they've shown quite a lot of vulnerability recently. And meanwhile, Scotland and Hungary, who I would probably, in recent form would say, yeah, they probably not expected to get out of the group stage. They've been playing above themselves, and Scotland have beaten Spain. Hungary have, thrashed England at Wembley. So it's tough to say. It kind of levels the group off when you have the strongest team playing poorly and the two weakest teams playing really well. I think it makes it quite unpredictable, actually.
Yeah, it really does. And you can add to that, Switzerland's kind of uncharacteristically unconvincing form in qualifying, kind of making them look a little weaker coming in than we would normally think.
Exactly. I think Switzerland, I mean, they always seem to get out of the group stage, at least over the last 10 years. And, I would have thought the same, but their qualifying campaign, which was uncharacteristically poor, maybe throws that into doubt just a little bit. That plus some aging stars like, Shaqiri and some other players that they've relied on for a while are kind of aging or out of the team.
Yeah, Xhaka, another one there. Let's talk about Germany a little bit, though, because they are coming in off of two poor World Cup performances. And we alluded to it earlier, like unbelievable to me that they didn't want to go through qualifying. I mean, if there was one group or one team that needed to a qualifying campaign to kind of gather themselves, it was Germany.
Yeah, I mean, it was stunning at the last World Cup. I mean, 2018 was a shock they didn't get out of the group stage, but you felt surely the Germans, of all teams, would find a way to right that, and they didn't. They crashed out again. So it's really quite, like you said, probably their weakest period in their entire history.
And not only that, but at the hands of weak teams. So South Korea and Japan, we still see, or I see soccer as still fairly Eurocentric, not as much as it used to be, but I think that kind of adds insult to injury. And then losses to teams like, was it a 4-0 loss to North Macedonia at home?
They did lose to North Macedonia at home. Yeah, I forget the result. You might be right there. And that's the thing. I mean, Germany, you would expect home field advantage to be huge for them. It will definitely be a factor. But Germany have been vulnerable even at home. They've lost to third-tier teams at home recently. And even in the Nations League, they've been losing games at home. Germany are such a strong team, but such a strong team at home in general, that even that, foundational pillar has cracked as well. So, I mean, home field advantage will, I think will boost Germany, but it might not tip them over the edge to win it like perhaps it might have in years past.
Yeah, I worry too, the psychological effect. I was going to talk about that with losing to those weak teams, that, it might even make them more nervous at home because they have so much to prove, and the pressure might cause them to perform poorly. Do you trust Germany to kind of come back?
The pressure is going to be enormous, and they haven't even had good results since the World Cup. So the pressure is going to be huge. I think, we don't see any of the other three teams as really a tier one team. So maybe the draw was favorable to them, versus drawing a team like Netherlands from pot 2 or Italy from pot 4. They maybe avoided that. So they'll have enough to get through and probably win the group, I suspect. But I see them as vulnerable as they've ever been. It is worrying.
Yeah. I mean, they were going into I think it was the 2006 World Cup after 2002, where they did fairly well. The team was aging. There was a lot of worry going into the 2006 World Cup, which they hosted, and they kind of pulled it off there. So I think I'm kind of expecting Germany to do the same here, but I think there is a possibility that the pressure may be too much. A slim possibility that will happen.
Yeah. And
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to ask how you see Scotland in amongst all this.
I think they're honestly the lowest in the group. They did have a good qualifying campaign, but to be honest, they look fairly weak in the 2020 Euro Cup. So I think reaching the tournament at this point is pretty good. But I think they'll be one of those teams that are kind of happy to be there and not really a threat. I would like them to be, but I don't really think they have the squad strength to really challenge here.
Yeah, I agree. At the previous Euros, they even had the advantage of playing some of their games at home, and still weren't able to get past the group stage. I think they also peaked early in qualifying and have kind of come down a bit since then. Even in some of their friendly and other results and Nations League results haven't been as good. So yeah, I don't really see them getting out of the group here.
Yeah, me neither. Do you see Hungary as perhaps challenging either of Germany or Switzerland? Have we agreed, by the way, that we're viewing Switzerland as the second team here?
That's certainly my view. I think for Hungary, they're just the hardest team to predict. I could see them winning the group. They, if they're capable of it, and they've shown in very recently that they can beat these top teams and do it with some regularity. Switzerland, they could be an argument that maybe they've had a strong generation that's aging out. So maybe Switzerland are on the decline, and I think Hungary could very well finish kind of anywhere from first to last in this group. So they're a difficult one to predict. Yeah, I probably favor Switzerland just on the consistency they always show at finals, but Hungary, I really don't know where to put them.
Yeah, the other thing too is I think I remember writing up Hungary at one point. I've been working on the player files over the past couple of months, and I think at first I thought, well, they've lost a couple of forwards that would be hard to replace. But taking a closer look at it, I really feel that their squad is kind of improving. I think they really were kind of playing above themselves in 2016 and even 2020. But I think actually now the squad is kind of justifying their strength a bit more.
Yeah. What do you see about the Swiss squad? I'm not sure if you've had a look at that yet in depth or not.
No, I have been looking at the squad. As you said, there are a few aging players, but I don't think that's really showing yet. I think it would be a bit presumptuous to say that that's the cause of their weak qualification or second half, really, of the qualification campaign. But I wouldn't put it down to that. And they always seem to kind of produce players to replace. It's not like they've had a golden generation or anything. They've been fairly consistently a good team over the past 5 to 6 years. So I'm kind of going with the more historical view. But as you say, I think Hungary is a bit of a wild card in that.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask you too whether you see a potential disaster looming for Germany or whether you think they'll they'll be comfortable enough in the group stage.
Yeah, I mean, I said a slim chance earlier, but I think, I think I would give it like about a 20% chance. I mean, it's hard to say. No one would have imagined that they would have been knocked out of a second World Cup group stage in a row. And I just think it was a disastrous, whether it was their decision to not participate in qualifying, but a disastrous end, because you just don't get the team building in friendlies that you do from a qualification campaign.
Yeah.
So I think there's a small chance of that, but I wouldn't predict it.
Yeah, no, those fair comments.
Yeah, but speaking of predictions, I think it is time, Connor, for you to lay down your cards.
We started our look with a very interesting group with, kind of to summarize it, the strong teams looking a bit weaker and the weak teams looking a bit stronger. So this is a tough group. But I am going to say Germany first and Switzerland second, Hungary third, with Scotland fourth. But I do see, the possibility for Hungary to finish second or even first place in this group.
Yeah, and I would even go a bit farther to say that, given, it basically, if recent form plays a big role, this group could turn out anyway, even Scotland kind of surprising like they did in qualifying. I tend to go, though, more with the historical strength, and I think that plays psychologically on teams in the Cup too. I mean, we've seen kind of teams do well in qualifying and then get to the group stage and basically happy to be there, not believing that they can really challenge. I mean, we have seen teams surprise too, but I'm with you on this. I'd say Germany, Switzerland, Hungary, Scotland in that order, but with a healthy dose of spice in there. What am I trying to say? I mean, an openness to things turning out completely different than that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of our look at Group A, and we will take a look at the players of these teams in detail. So I will see you again when we look at Group B, Connor.
See you then.
We would like to thank Mike Kripak, Make Sound Music, and Pixabay for the wonderful background music called Dance 90s accompanying this media cast.